Could Shelob have taken the One Ring? It's a strange question at first glance, almost absurd. She's not a ring wraith, nor a great king, nor a dark sorcerer. She's a giant spider, a monster, a creature of instinct. And yet, the question lingers, because Shelob isn't just a spider. She's ancient, powerful, sentient in her own way. So what would have happened if Frodo had died in her lair? If she had, perhaps by accident or hunger, claimed the One Ring for herself? Let's follow that thread. Part 1. What Shelob actually was first. It's important to remember that Shelob is not some random beast. She is the daughter of Ungoliant, the primordial spider being who once helped Morgoth destroy the two trees of Valinor. That's no small lineage. Ungoliant devoured light. She wrapped the world in a darkness so thick even the stars were hidden. And she grew stronger the more she consumed. Shelob, though a lesser creature, shares in that legacy of hunger and power. She is described as ancient, older than Sauron, and dwelling in Mordor before he even returned there. She is cunning, patient, and full of malice. She chooses when to strike. She tortures. She toys with her prey. Tolkien never calls her mindless. On the contrary, he paints her as deliberate and terrifyingly aware. So if she had come into possession of the ring, even by accident, what then? Part 2. Could she even wear it? Let's tackle the most obvious obstacle. The ring is meant to be worn. Could Shelob wear the One Ring? The answer is, maybe not in the traditional sense. The ring was made to be worn by beings with fingers, yes, but we also know that it exerts its influence in ways that go beyond mere contact. Frodo wears it on a chain for most of his journey, and it still affects him. Boromir never touches it, and yet it haunts his dreams. Gollum loses it for decades and still feels its pull. The ring wants to be found. It wants to corrupt, to be used. So if Shelob, bloated and crawling through her tunnels, took the ring in her web or her maw, kept it close to her body, its influence could still act. Even if she never knew what it was, the ring might still begin its work. Part 3. Would it corrupt her? Here's where things get interesting. The ring corrupts by twisting desire. Boromir wants power to defend Gondor. Gollum wants his precious. Saruman wants knowledge and control. Even Frodo, who resists with all his strength, feels his call. But what does Shelob want? She doesn't seek to rule. She doesn't desire armies or conquest. She wants to feed, to dominate her lair, to fill the silence with the sound of suffering. It's not entirely clear how the ring would act on that kind of hunger, but it's possible the ring would amplify it. It might sharpen her instincts, make her more aggressive, increase her size and her strength, perhaps even grant her a darker intelligence. Not enough to speak, but enough to become something more like her mother, Ungoliant, a dark presence that spreads and consumes. She wouldn't become a dark queen with a crown of webs, but she might become something worse, a devouring shadow too terrible to approach, something even Sauron would have to reckon with. Part 4. Would the ring accept her? The One Ring was made for Sauron. It bears his will, and it seeks to return to him. That's important. It manipulates others not for their own sake, but to find its way back to its master. When it tempts Boromir or Frodo, it's not offering power freely, it's baiting them. And eventually, it wants to betray them. So what would it make of Shelob? It might see her as a tool, a temporary host, an instrument of destruction. But it's also possible that the ring would struggle to control her. Shelob is ancient and alien. She is not human. She doesn't speak, doesn't dream, doesn't reason the way mortals do. Would she be seduced by visions of power? Unlikely. but the ring might still pour its malice into her, inflaming her hunger into a world-ending force. She would not become the next Sauron, but she might become a disaster of a different kind. Part 5. A dark what if. Let's say for a moment that Frodo dies in Shelob's lair. Sam flees, Gollum disappears, and Shelob takes the ring. She doesn't understand it, but she keeps it. She hoards it. It sits in the heart of her webbed tunnels, pulsing with dark energy. Over time, she becomes more aggressive. Orcs begin to avoid the pass entirely. Even the Nazgûl stop coming near. Shelob expands her territory. The mountain becomes her kingdom. A dark fog spreads from her lair. Sauron senses something is wrong. The ring is near, but unreachable. And worse, it's resisting him. It has a new master, not in mind, but in dominance. A new center of gravity. Would he go to reclaim it? Could he? Or would Shelob have become too great, too entrenched, too monstrous even for him to challenge? Perhaps she becomes the first being since Morgoth to threaten Sauron, not with cunning or armies, but with unrelenting hunger. A living darkness that cannot be reasoned with or corrupted. The ring wouldn't crown her. It wouldn't teach her magic, but it might magnify her nature until she became something that even the Dark Tower feared. Part 7. Why it didn't happen. Thankfully, none of this came to pass. Frodo survived. Sam did what few could have. He wounded her, drove her back, and reclaimed the ring before it could be lost. But the fact that the question even exists, the fact that it was close, is telling. The One Ring is not picky. It doesn't need understanding. It just needs to be wanted, hoarded, desired. Shelob, driven by gluttony and malice, had all the makings of a perfect temporary vessel. It wouldn't have made her a ruler, but it could have made her an apex predator of apocalyptic scale. Part 8. The bigger idea. This is the power of Tolkien's world. Even a creature like Shelob, who never speaks a word, who exists in shadow and silence, can raise questions about power, corruption, and fate. The ring doesn't just tempt the noble. It tempts the monstrous. It doesn't always elevate. It often degrades. So could Shelob have taken the One Ring? Yes, not as its master, but as its monster. And Middle-earth would have been far darker for it. Thanks for sitting by the fire at Campfire Dunedain. If this journey into the shadows stirred something in you, give the tale a like and share it with a fellow wanderer. There are still many ancient things lurking in the forgotten corners of Middle-earth, and many more stories waiting to be told. Until next time, keep your lantern close, your courage closer, and remember, sometimes the biggest terrors aren't the ones we see, but the ones we almost forget.